Welcome to the Dream Novel channel. Before starting to listen to the fun in this clip, don't forget to like and comment, so that the admin will have the encouragement to continue making clips. Let's go listen. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 56, A Bet with Hagrid. Because of the news in the Daily Prophet, the young wizards were distracted and found it difficult to focus during their lessons. This was especially true for students from Muggle families, who, after quickly gathering as much information as they could about the swooping evil, began to worry intensely about the safety of their loved ones. The swooping evil, after all, was one of the most dangerous creatures in the wizarding world, known to feed on human brains. The thought of it potentially roaming free in a Muggle community made them even more anxious. Even while sitting in class, many kept glancing nervously toward the windows, hoping that an owl would soon bring reassuring replies from home. The professors did their best to comfort the students, slowing down the teaching pace and offering words of reassurance, but there wasn't much else they could do. It wasn't until the second class of the morning that the atmosphere began to improve. "Cheer up, children," Professor Sprout said as she walked into the greenhouse for her biology class. She saw the young witches and wizards looking glum and gave them an encouraging smile. Just now, Mr. Newt Scamander issued a statement confirming that no traces of the swooping evil have been found in either the wizarding or Muggle world. So, it has probably flown to another place, and you don't need to worry about the safety of your families. As she spoke, Professor Sprout took out a collection of briefings she had saved for years and began telling the class about Newt Scamander's many accomplishments. Kyle noticed that some of the briefings were quite old, with the oldest one faded and worn. It detailed Newt's significant contribution to defeating the dark wizard Grindelwald, complete with a photograph of a young and dashing Scamander. The students, after hearing about Scamander's achievements, felt a great sense of relief. If the most renowned expert on magical creatures was confident, then they trusted his word. The fact that Scamander was a close friend of Headmaster Dumbledore made him even more reliable in their eyes. By the time lunch rolled around, the atmosphere in the Great Hall was much livelier. "I can't believe I forgot I had classes this afternoon," Cedric grumbled, disappointed, as he picked up a potato still in its skin. "Looks like I can't go with you to visit Hagrid. What a shame." Second-year students had more homework than first years, and rarely had afternoons off except on weekends or during holidays, so Cedric couldn't join Kyle for the visit. "It's just to get some mooncalf manure." "What's so bad about that?" Kyle asked, taking a bite of his bread. "What, are you going to keep ornamental plants too?" "No, I'm more interested in mooncalves," Cedric replied. "I've heard they perform a complicated dance in the moonlight. It sounds amazing, but I've never seen one in real life." "You probably won't get to see the dance," Kyle shrugged. "That only happens at night, and by then it'll be past curfew, unless you're up for a nighttime adventure." "I know," Cedric sighed. "That's why I just want to see a mooncalf, even if it's during the day." "That's still possible," Kyle nodded. "Although mooncalves sleep during the day, they usually stay in caves, and you can still catch a glimpse of them, assuming Hagrid keeps them near the edge of the Forbidden Forest." Kyle put down his pumpkin juice and said, "How about this? Let's go right after lunch. We've got over an hour before class, so we should have time." Cedric's eyes lit up. "Really? Is that okay?" "Of course, there's no set time for it." At that moment, Kyle noticed Conna sitting next to them, showing interest. Casually, he asked, "Do you want to come along?" Conna hesitated briefly before nodding. Thanks to Professor Sprout's stories about Newt Scamander, Conna had developed a fascination with magical creatures and was eager to see them up close. After lunch, the three of them headed to Hagrid's cabin by the Forbidden Forest. This time, they didn't bother knocking. When they arrived, they found Hagrid watering his pumpkin patch. After Halloween, the massive pumpkins had disappeared, leaving behind small seedlings. "Go into the Forbidden Forest?" Hagrid asked, shaking his head vigorously after hearing Kyle's request. "No, no, no. First-year students aren't allowed in there, it's too dangerous." "It's fine, Hagrid," Kyle said with a smile. No one knows the forbidden forest better than you. Besides, the moon calves are at the safer edge of the forest, and with you guiding us, we'll be perfectly safe. Even if you say that, I still... By the way, Kyle interrupted smoothly, you know so much about magical creatures. I bet you'll be the next Care of Magical Creatures professor when Professor Kettleburn retires. Me, a professor? No way. I'm not nearly as good as Professor Kettleburn, Hagrid mumbled, looking flustered even through his bushy beard. Cedric noticed Hagrid's discomfort but pressed on gently. We trust you, Hagrid. You know the Forbidden Forest and its creatures better than anyone. Hagrid hesitated for a moment, then sighed. All right, but you have to promise to stay close to me and not wander off. If you do, I'll send you back immediately, and you won't be allowed near the Forbidden Forest again. We promise, Professor Hagrid, the three of them said in unison, grinning. Hagrid blushed at the title, but his expression darkened slightly as he muttered, I can't be a professor, don't say that where others might hear. You need to have a little more confidence in yourself, Kyle said seriously, stepping forward to pat Hagrid on the back of his hand. Give it 4 years, and I'm sure you'll be a professor. Impossible, Hagrid shook his head. You don't need to comfort me. Kyle's eyes twinkled as he proposed, how about we make a bet? If you're not a professor in 4 years, I'll arrange for Newt Scamander to let you take care of his dragon for 2 months during the summer holidays. Hagrid froze mid-step, turning toward Kyle with disbelief. Mr. Scamander has a dragon? Yes, Kyle confirmed with a nod. It's been sent back 3 times by the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary because of its terrible temper. It attacks anything that moves after it leaves Newt. After the 3rd time, they refuse to take it back. It can't be released into the wild, so it's kept in a box. Hagrid's eyes widened with excitement. I agree, he said immediately, unable to resist the allure of spending time with a dragon. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 57, What to Do When the Dog Has No Appetite. Who in the wizarding world would refuse to raise a dragon? Hagrid certainly wouldn't. And as for his grumpy disposition, so what? Children are supposed to be a little mischievous, after all. Being sent back by the Romanian Dragon Sanctuary only proves those people are incompetent. Just look at how scrawny they are, like walking twigs. How could they possibly manage to raise a dragon properly? All right, if you become a professor. Kyle began. No problem. Hagrid interrupted before Kyle could finish. With a wave of his hand, he said, I agree to the bet. He didn't even stop to consider whether Kyle could actually convince Newt, or whether Dumbledore would allow a dragon at Hogwarts. He just agreed right away. It almost seemed like Hagrid was worried Kyle might change his mind, as he quickened his pace, leading the 3 of them, who had to jog to keep up, towards the Mooncalf's cave. You lot stay here, don't go any further, Hagrid said seriously, turning back to the group. Mooncalves tire themselves out when they dance, so they need plenty of rest during the day. You've got to be as quiet as possible. Conna and Cedric nodded quietly, their eyes curiously fixed on the cave entrances that looked like tents. But where was Kyle? The Mooncalves didn't interest him, he'd seen them countless times with Newt. His attention had shifted to the Wiggin-trees surrounding them. Compared to other places, the Wiggin-trees here were tall, thick, and stretched high into the sky. Kyle approached one and knocked on its trunk, which sounded solid and firm. Noticing Kyle's actions, Hagrid whispered an explanation. Because mooncalves stomp their droppings into the ground, Wiggin-trees grow really well around them. By the way, this is also a bowtruckle's nest. Kyle glanced up and soon spotted countless, little green seedlings scattered throughout the Wiggin-trees. It was exactly like what Newt had shown him. In that magical suitcase, the bowtruckles and mooncalves were neighbors. Kyle picked up a branch from the ground. Hagrid, can I collect some branches? You can, but what do you need them for? I've got some ideas. When they emerged from the Forbidden Forest, Hagrid was carrying a large bundle of dead branches in his hands. Kyle had wanted to use the floating charm to help, but Hagrid found that unnecessary and insisted on carrying them himself. Once they exited the forest, Cedric headed back to the castle for his classes, leaving Kyle and Conna behind. Unlike their previous visit, Hagrid warmly invited the two of them to stop by his cabin. As soon as they entered, a big black dog came bounding toward them, tongue hanging out and tail wagging furiously like a fan. Kyle reached down and gave the dog's head a good scratch, nearly rolling his eyes in pleasure. It felt great. "All right, Fong, come here," Hagrid called, placing a grayish pot on the floor. Fong immediately rushed over, diving into the pot with excitement. Hagrid patted his head and said, "Eat slowly, there's more if you need it." As they chatted, Kyle glanced around the cabin. The space was small, consisting of a single room. A ham hung from the ceiling, along with a pheasant, and a brazier with a copper kettle sat boiling water. In one corner was a large bed covered with ragged quilting. The room looked rather shabby, inconspicuous at best. But Kyle noticed something else. The ham was made from Tibo warthog, and the rope used to hang it appeared to be a shiny, white silk, likely from an acromantula spider. And the cushion they were sitting on? It was made from unicorn hair. Though not entirely tail hair, it was still an impressively luxurious cushion, the most expensive one Kyle had ever sat on. Once Hagrid sat down, Kyle introduced them. "This is Conna, and the one who just left is Cedric. They're both Hufflepuffs like me, but Cedric's a second year." "Hello," Hagrid greeted Conna warmly. He then handed both her and Kyle a piece of rock cake from the plate next to him. "You must be hungry. Try some of my cooking." Conna picked up the rock cake, only to feel its unexpected weight, as though she were holding a brick. She blinked, wisely choosing not to take a bite. Kyle refrained from eating as well, but he cleverly asked Hagrid for another piece, saying he would share it with Cedric later. Hagrid, delighted by this, generously handed Kyle the entire plate of rock cakes and encouraged him to come back for more anytime. Kyle, of course, didn't want them, so he took only 2 and stuffed them into his pocket. He wasn't planning on eating them either, even if they tasted decent. Without a giant's teeth, they were practically inedible. However, they might prove useful for self-defense. Lately, Snape had been pushing him to his limit, and Kyle felt on the verge of a breakdown. If worse came to worst, the rock cakes would make an excellent tool for self-preservation. He could always claim he offered Professor Snape a rock cake, but Snape had simply failed to catch it. After handing back the plate, Hagrid looked at Kyle, an awkward expression on his face. "Well, I've got this dog, but he's been a bit sluggish lately, not eating much. What do you think could be wrong?" Kyle instinctively glanced at Fong, who was eagerly devouring his second bowl of food. Lacking energy? No appetite? It couldn't be Fong, so Kyle looked back at Hagrid, puzzled. Hagrid quickly clarified. "Not Fong, the other dog." "Oh." Kyle realized Hagrid was talking about the three-headed dog. Kyle looked around the cabin but didn't see any sign of the creature. "Didn't I tell you before?" Kyle said, turning back to Hagrid. "You just need to let him loose in the Forbidden Forest." "I did, but it didn't work," Hagrid replied, sounding a bit frustrated. "He perked up while he was out there, but as soon as I brought him back to the cabin, he became sluggish again." Kyle was momentarily speechless. Hagrid's unique way of thinking never failed to amaze him. Did he really believe he was just walking a regular dog, and then bringing it back here? "Hagrid, the three-headed dog." Kyle began. "Just one head. Just one head." Hagrid interrupted, denying it frantically. Kyle took a deep breath, ignoring Hagrid's protests, and continued, "The three-headed dog is a large magical creature that naturally prefers open, spacious environments. If they're kept in a small, low-ceilinged space for too long, they start to feel depressed." "It's not small in here," Hagrid muttered defensively. "Well, it's fine for you," Kyle explained patiently. "But within a year, a three-headed dog can grow to 3 meters tall, and its body can stretch over 5 meters in length. By then, It'll barely be able to turn around in here. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 58. What an ugly dog. Connor was completely dumbfounded during the entire exchange between Kyle and Hagrid. Who am I? What am I doing here? And what on earth are they talking about? She wondered. Weren't they just talking about a dog with no appetite? Now they're mentioning a three-headed dog. What even is that? A dog with 3 heads? But there's no such creature in this house. Kyle. Connor quickly interrupted while Hagrid was deep in thought. What were you talking about just now? But Kyle didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to Hagrid and motioned with his head. Come on, don't hide it. I'm not a professional veterinarian, I need to see it for myself. I didn't. Hagrid started to protest, but after a moment of hesitation and remembering the sorry state of his furry friend, he sighed in defeat. All right, but you can't tell anyone. Of course, Kyle nodded. I swear on Cedric's character. Hagrid, too wrapped up in his own thoughts, didn't quite catch what Kyle said and stood up to leave the room. But Connor heard it loud and clear. Why did you swear on Cedric's character? She asked, confused. Don't worry about the details, Kyle replied with a dismissive wave. If I had one, I would have sworn on mine. Connor fell silent and moved aside, not sure what to make of that. Hagrid returned shortly afterward, and it was clear the place where he had hidden Fluffy wasn't far from the cabin. Once back inside, Hagrid hurriedly drew the curtains and lifted the moleskin coat draped over his arm, revealing Fluffy, the infamous 3-headed dog, tucked beneath it. Fluffy was now almost as big as a cow. Realizing he'd been brought into the cramped room again, he quickly lowered his head and lay flat on the floor, trying to make himself as small as possible. Conna was utterly shocked. She had never imagined Hagrid would actually bring out a dog with 3 heads, and it was so ugly. The 3-headed dog, like many large magical creatures, was not what one might call cute. Fluffy's giant mouth, packed with sharp teeth, took up nearly half of each head. His nose was wrinkled up, with folds of flesh that resembled a washboard. Does the 3-headed dog have Sharpay blood or something? Kyle mused, scratching his head. He wasn't entirely sure. He had never seen one before, and even Newt's magical suitcase didn't have everything. In fact, even in Greece, the 3-headed dog was an exceptionally rare magical creature, almost as rare as a basilisk. Kyle figured that whoever sold Fluffy to Hagrid must have been an outsider. What luck, Kyle said to himself, reaching out to stroke Fluffy's rather unattractive head. The fur was stiff, feeling almost like a well-worn shoe brush left out in the elements, definitely not as pleasant as Fong's soft coat. Fluffy, ever the feisty one, didn't appreciate the gesture. Realizing one of his heads was being petted, he opened his mouth and tried to bite Kyle's hand. Kyle dodged quickly and gently patted the middle head. Don't be naughty. I'll give you a treat later. At this, Fluffy calmed down instantly and responded with a couple of soft woofs. How about some murtlap dried rat meat? Kyle suggested after a moment's thought. It's tougher than beef, and I bet you'll like it. Woof. Came Fluffy's response. 30. Kyle frowned. No way, that's too much. I only have 9. You 3 can split it. Kyle was busy haggling with Fluffy when Hagrid, who had been observing the whole exchange, nearly jumped out of his skin in disbelief. Looking from Kyle to Fluffy, he asked, Did Mr. Scamander teach you that as well? Kyle just smiled and didn't answer. In the wizarding world, many knew that Kyle had a knack for communicating with magical creatures, but the explanation given to the public was simple: Mr. Scamander taught him. Since Newt had never denied this, most people accepted it as the truth. After all, as the greatest magizoologist of the century, Newt Scamander was expected to know some tricks that others didn't. However, only a select few knew the real story: the Weasleys, Newt himself, and Dumbledore. But Hagrid certainly wasn't one of them. By Merlin's beard, Hagrid said, looking at Kyle with awe and a hint of envy. It seems Mr. Scamander thinks very highly of you. I begged him for ages, but he never agreed to teach me how to talk to magical creatures. These are just little tricks, Hagrid, Kyle replied, smiling as he fed some dried murtlap meat to Fluffy. Besides, you already understand what Fluffy's saying, even if you don't speak his language. Yes, I do. Hagrid said proudly. I always know what Fluffy wants, and he knows me too. He was a real handful when he was little, but if I sing, he always falls right asleep. To demonstrate, Hagrid began singing softly while gently patting Fluffy. Kyle could hear Fluffy's thoughts loud and clear. It's starting again, my head is killing me. Just sleep, it'll be over soon. Go to sleep, now. As Hagrid sang, all three of Fluffy's heads gradually drooped, and within moments, they were snoring loudly. Their synchronized, well-practiced slumber made Kyle feel almost sorry for the poor creature. See? He's asleep, Hagrid said, beaming with satisfaction. Kyle laughed awkwardly, glancing at Hagrid's happy face. After a moment of thought, he decided against revealing what Fluffy had actually been thinking and shifted the conversation back to a more pressing issue. He's getting really big now, Hagrid, Kyle said, stroking one of Fluffy's heads. You must have noticed he's been in a low mood ever since we brought him into this room. You need to let him loose in the Forbidden Forest as soon as possible. I know, Hagrid sighed, looking troubled. But I'm just not comfortable with it. Fluffy's still so young. What if something happens to him without me around? Kyle raised an eyebrow. He had a strong suspicion that Hagrid should be more concerned about the well-being of the other creatures in the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid hesitated for a moment before continuing, his eyes darting around the room. And if I put him in the Forbidden Forest, Dumbledore might see him. What if he decides to send Fluffy away? Then put him deeper into the Forbidden Forest, Kyle suggested. Don't forget, this is a delicate time. The Ministry's Aurors are tracking down every unknown magical creature. It's better if Dumbledore finds Fluffy than them. But he's not one of those creatures, Hagrid protested, his face flushed with excitement. I checked thoroughly. The Greek who sold him to me wasn't in any of the photos the Ministry released. The Aurors won't care about that, Kyle said calmly. What they'll care about is the fact that you happened to purchase an unknown three-headed dog right before that group was arrested. That's enough to make them suspicious. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 59. The headmaster's office. Kyle and Connor returned to the castle shortly after leaving Hagrid's hut. Once they were gone, Hagrid sat alone, pondering until evening. In the end, he decided to follow Kyle's advice and release Fluffy into the Forbidden Forest that very night. Although reluctant, he knew there was no other choice. First and foremost, it would make Fluffy happier. And if Fluffy was happy, Hagrid would be too. Kyle had made a valid point. The situation was tense. Just earlier, Professor Oren from Defense Against the Dark Arts had complained to Hagrid while gathering materials in the Forbidden Forest. The professor had been frustrated that, due to the day's daily profit report, the Ministry of Magic had deployed most of their best teams to track down any magical creatures with uncertain origins, to show they were handling the matter seriously. This crackdown made it nearly impossible for Oren to buy the supplies he needed. Instead, he was forced to catch them himself in the forest. Hagrid chuckled, remembering how Oren had cursed Fudge as an idiot in his frustration. At the time, it had seemed amusing, but now Hagrid regretted not joining in the cursing. The truth was, Hagrid had bought Fluffy in a pub, and there had been quite a few witnesses. Even though they didn't know what exactly he had purchased, if any of them were caught, they might try to save themselves by reporting that Hagrid had been buying magical creatures. After all, for those people, a correct guess could help them avoid punishment, and a wrong one wouldn't hurt them. So, for Fluffy's safety, and to avoid causing Dumbledore any unnecessary trouble, Hagrid had no choice but to release Fluffy. Surely, those Aurors wouldn't dare search the Forbidden Forest, right? But if they did, Hagrid wasn't too concerned. After all, the forest's depths were home to werewolves and manticores, so what was one more three-headed dog? Meanwhile, back at the castle, Kyle was sitting in a corner of the common room, sorting through the bundle of Wiggentree branches he'd collected. Kanna watched curiously as he worked. "I was going to ask you," she said, eyeing the branches. "Why are you messing with those dead sticks when there are plenty of branches in the kitchen that you could just grab anytime? These aren't just ordinary branches. They're from Wiggentrees," Kyle explained. Wiggentrees are magical rowan trees. Anyone touching their trunks is protected from attacks by dark creatures. Kanna blinked. She knew that much, but what did that have to do with the branches? After all, branches and trunks weren't the same thing. Kyle, noticing her confusion, sighed. Never mind, you'll understand later." He picked out a particularly straight stick and set it aside. Then, as if the thought just occurred to him, he asked, "By the way, how did you know there are branches in the kitchen? Have you eaten there?" The kitchen was located close to the common room, and Kyle had been there a few times. However, every time he approached the door, he was promptly swarmed by house elves. The kitchen stove was farther inside, and the only way to fully see it was to sit at one of the long tables. Considering how enthusiastic the house elves were, Kyle mused, it was impossible to visit the kitchen without getting roped into a meal. And halfway through, they'd probably try to serve you an entire cow. I'm not. Don't say things like that." Kanna's face suddenly turned beet red as she stammered, I was just curious and went to take a look in the kitchen." "I see," Kyle replied nonchalantly, focusing on sorting the Wiggentree branches. By the time he finished, he realized Kanna had quietly returned to the dormitory, leaving him as the only one still in the common room. Remembering that tomorrow was the weekend, Kyle decided to pack up and head to bed early. He had no intention of staying up late. After all, the next day was important for Hufflepuff. The Quidditch tournament was starting, and their first match was against Slytherin. The next morning, the Hufflepuff students were up bright and early, energized for the big game. After breakfast, they donned their uniforms and grabbed the cheer flags they'd made, heading to the Quidditch pitch to support their team. Kyle was supposed to join them, but after finishing breakfast, a plump ghost suddenly floated toward him. "Hello, Kyle. I hope I'm not interrupting your breakfast," greeted the fat friar. "Hello, friar," Kyle replied politely. "Care to watch the Quidditch match with us? Hufflepuff has a good chance of winning this year." "I prefer gobstones, I'm afraid," the friar said with a hint of regret. "Unfortunately, Hogwarts cancelled that game decades ago." "Oh, I see. Sorry to hear that," Kyle said quickly, not wanting to make the ghost feel bad. "I hope I haven't ruined your day." "Of course not, my boy," the friar smiled warmly. "The best part about being a ghost is that nothing ever really goes wrong. But speaking of things, I'm afraid you'll have to delay your plans to watch the game. Dumbledore wants to see you in his office, 8th floor. The password is Butterfinger." "Dumbledore wants to see me?" Kyle was caught off guard. Curiosity piqued, he asked, "Do you know why the headmaster wants to see me, friar?" "I'm just the messenger," the fat friar shook his head with a gentle smile. "All right, I'll go now." "Thanks, friar." After saying goodbye, Kyle immediately made his way to the 8th floor. It wasn't every day the headmaster requested a meeting, and Kyle wondered what it could be about. Hopefully, he wouldn't miss the Quidditch match. Thanks to his familiarity with the castle's layout, Kyle quickly found the ugly stone gargoyle guarding the entrance to the headmaster's office. "Butterfinger," Kyle said aloud. With a jump, the gargoyle moved aside, and the wall behind it split open to reveal a set of revolving stairs, slowly ascending like an escalator. Kyle stepped on and rode the stairs up to a large oak door with a griffin-shaped knocker. He hesitated for a moment before giving the door a gentle tap. The griffin knocker came to life, flapping its wings as the door slowly opened. Kyle stepped into the headmaster's office and couldn't help but look around with wide-eyed curiosity. The room was spacious and circular, filled with odd, fascinating little noises. Various strange silver devices cluttered the desk, spinning and emitting wisps of smoke, their purposes entirely unknown to Kyle, but he was certain none of them were mere humidifiers. Along the wall stood a stone basin engraved with mysterious symbols, and next to it was a colossal mirror. The mirror towered to the ceiling, framed in gleaming gold, with two claw-shaped feet supporting it on the ground. Channel Dream Novel. Chapter 60, helping the headmaster soothe his pet. The Mirror of Erist, a legendary alchemical artifact, had the power to reveal a person's deepest desires. Whatever their heart most longed for would appear before them when they stood in front of it. It was a mesmerizing and magical object. Is this some kind of mirror of the mind? Kyle mused, resisting the temptation to take a peek. He deliberately looked away, knowing the allure could be overwhelming. It seems you recognize the Mirror of Erist. Dumbledore's gentle voice came from behind Kyle. The headmaster had appeared without Kyle noticing. I'm glad you were able to resist its temptations. This is something many adult wizards find difficult to do. People often waste away in front of it, entranced by their own visions, sometimes even driven to madness. I just don't want to add to my worries, Headmaster, Kyle replied with a chuckle as he turned around. I'm quite content with my life as it is. A very wise choice, Dumbledore nodded approvingly. He stepped closer to the mirror, his fingers brushing the ornate golden frame. I must admit, you've already surpassed me in this regard. Even I find it hard to resist looking at the mirror from time to time. Curious, Kyle asked, so, what do you see when you look in the mirror, Headmaster? The true meaning of magic? Or perhaps a deeper, more profound theory? Dumbledore smiled warmly, his eyes twinkling. You've made me blush, Kyle. I'm afraid I'm not as great as you imagine. What I see is myself holding a pair of thick, woolen socks. Kyle raised an eyebrow in surprise, but Dumbledore winked. There are never enough socks, you see. Christmas comes and goes, and I haven't received a single pair in ages. People always insist on giving me books. Kyle couldn't help but suspect that Dumbledore might be dropping a subtle hint, especially since Christmas was only 2 months away. As Kyle briefly considered whether he should take the hint and give socks as a gift, Dumbledore had already returned to his desk. He summoned a cup of black tea for himself and a plate of sweets appeared alongside. Would you like something to drink, Kyle? Dumbledore offered. Lemonade, please, Kyle replied. With a nod, a large glass of lemonade materialized on the table. Kyle took a sip and found that it tasted exactly like normal lemonade, nothing extraordinary, despite being in the headmaster's office. Dumbledore, meanwhile, was leisurely sipping his tea, showing no urgency to speak. The room was quiet, the portraits of previous headmasters hanging on the walls softly snoring in their frames. Occasionally, one would half open an eye and sneak a glance at Kyle, but they remained silent. The atmosphere was becoming a bit uncomfortable for Kyle, who wasn't used to the quiet stillness. Just then, the whistle of the Quidditch match echoed faintly from outside the window, signaling the start of the game. Finally gathering his thoughts, Kyle asked, Headmaster, what can I do for you? Ah, look at me, Dumbledore laughed softly, patting his forehead. I've been so distracted by my tea that I almost forgot the reason I asked you here. Dumbledore stood up and motioned for Kyle to follow him. They moved to a tall, gilded perch behind the door, where a magnificent fiery red bird was perched. It was Fawkes, the headmaster's phoenix. The phoenix has been sulking with me for a while now, Dumbledore said, looking rather distressed. But I can't figure out what the problem is. Could you ask him for me? Is that so? Kyle turned to Fawkes, who had already heard what Dumbledore said. The majestic bird glanced briefly at Kyle, then shot a displeased look at Dumbledore, chirping in clear frustration. Kyle nodded knowingly. No wonder you're so upset. What did it say? Dumbledore asked, intrigued. Despite his remarkable linguistic abilities, including mastering the languages of snakes and goblins, Phoenix speak remained elusive, especially since Fawkes, when irritated, seemed to speak with an accent that made it even more difficult to understand. With some discretion, Kyle responded, Headmaster, Fawkes says he doesn't want you putting cockroach clusters in its food anymore. Dumbledore blinked, clearly surprised. I always thought it'd enjoy those. Fawkes immediately turned its back to Dumbledore in anger, making it very clear that it did not appreciate the misunderstanding. It was a phoenix, after all, not a chicken. Worms were the furthest thing from its preferred diet. Realizing his error, Dumbledore quickly began apologizing, but Fawkes continued to snub him, turning away every time Dumbledore tried to speak, even covering its head with its wings as if to block out its owner's words. In the end, it was Kyle who managed to calm the fiery bird down. He offered Fawkes a leaf of dittany and a bluebell, which Fawkes swallowed in 2 quick bites, finally appeased. For the record, Kyle hadn't snatched the bluebell from the common room. It had been his reward for helping Professor Sprout clean the greenhouse. Watching it disappear into Fawkes' beak so quickly left Kyle feeling a bit dejected. He hadn't even gotten the chance to warm himself with it. I knew I could count on you, Dumbledore said, patting Kyle's shoulder happily. If it weren't for you, I might not have been able to calm it down for quite some time. It's nothing, Headmaster, Kyle replied, though his smile was a bit weak. Is there anything else? If not, I'd really like to go watch the Quidditch match. Kyle touched his moleskin pouch, feeling a bit uneasy about staying much longer. If Fawkes got upset again, he didn't have any more herbs to offer, and as a first year, he wasn't exactly stocked up on such things. Besides, Fawkes wasn't his phoenix, better to let Dumbledore handle it from here on out. There is one small matter, Dumbledore said, turning to retrieve a potion bottle from a drawer. This is a magic-suppressing potion for Mikkel. I was going to have Madame Pomfrey deliver it, but I suspect he's avoiding the infirmary. So I thought, since you're here, you could take it to him. Kyle accepted the bottle, but couldn't help asking, hasn't Mikkel learned to control his magic yet? It's not easy, Dumbledore replied after a thoughtful pause. But Pomona says he's making good progress. By the time he reaches his 2nd year, he likely won't need the potion anymore. Kyle nodded in understanding. Remember, Dumbledore added, this potion is important for Mikkel, even if it's not the most pleasant tasting. Make sure he drinks it, don't let him just toss it away. Don't worry, Headmaster, Kyle smiled, Michael's my roommate. I'll make sure he drinks it. That's reassuring to hear. Dumbledore raised his cup of black tea. Now, go enjoy the match. It should still be going on. Now the fun in this clip is over. Which listeners haven't liked and commented yet? You can press like and comment to encourage the admin find the fun in the next clip. May the listeners be happy forever.